Now, I'll be honest, the Negroni is not one of my favourite cocktails. I wouldn't order it at a bar, and I definitely wouldn't make it for myself at home. But all that said, it does have an absolutely huge fan base. So it's our job as bartenders, for customer service, for education, for knowledge and inspiration, it is our job to know the cocktail inside out, but then also pass some of that knowledge on to you guys so you guys can go and have some fun for yourselves at home. So here it goes. This is your Negroni Masterclass from a non-ego tender point of view. Cocktail fans, welcome back to the Drinkstuff YouTube channel. We are your one-stop shop for all your cocktail needs except for the booze. My name is Steve the Barman and I'm just purely here for your fun inspiration to help you on your cocktail journey. Right then, without further ado, let's just crack on and show you how to make the most basic, the only recipe for a Negroni. Really, really simple. 3 ingredients: your base gin, your Campari, and your Vermouth, your Rosso, your red Vermouth of choice. Equal parts traditionally. So I'm going 30 ml of each. You could go 25 ml. You could go 50 ml, whatever you're making, but just traditionally one part of each. So 30 ml of gin, 30 ml of your Campari, and 30 ml of your Martini Rosso in this case. To a mixing glass. This is not a shaken cocktail. This is a stirred down cocktail. There's no juice, there's no citrus. There's nothing like that in here. So we simply put it in a mixing glass and stir for a few seconds. Then when that's nicely stirred down, just got a nice ice-filled tumbler, single strain, julep strainer, hawthorn strainer, single strain that over fresh ice into your rocks glass, pop that down there, and then traditional garnish would be a nice orange peel, or if you're like me, you left your oranges at home, so I've had to go into the kitchen here in the studio and get a Satsuma, so I've got a Satsuma peel. But that is simply the Negroni. All right, my palate is changing. I'm getting to love the Campari. I'm getting to love the bittersweet thing, but for this cocktail has no sweetness in it for me at all. So it's just purely a kind of neat alcoholic drink, and that's why I'm not a huge fan, but I completely understand why it has got a huge fan base. And I have to say, do you know what? I'm filming this, it's like 10:30 in the morning. It's not a bad breakfast drink, to be fair. Like, I do completely get it. It's just a bit too bitter for me personally. I just want a touch of sweetness in that. But I'm going to come on to that. I'm going to come on to some simple riffs and fun inspiration for you. That's what these videos are all about. So don't go anywhere just yet. Now let's just get on and debunk a couple of things before we go any further. I actually had this last week. I had a corporate event last week where I was kind of doing this to a room full. It was about 80, 85 in the room. And it was me mic'd up, giving a presentation, talking through a few cocktails. And we got onto the Negroni. And there was a couple of questions. It's actually what kind of spurred this whole video. There was a few questions that came up. The first one that came up was, when I make I love Negronis. When I make a Negroni at home, it always tastes better than what I have when I go to a bar and when I order it out. Why is that? So that's the first one I want to kind of debunk. And normally it's the opposite way round, isn't it? Normally you go out to a bar and the cocktails taste better than what you can make for yourselves at home. Normally that's how it goes. However, for a simple cocktail like this, which is just 3 ingredients stirred down, it is really easy to make at home and it's really easy to make it to your specific requirements. So here we go. We have to go through this in stages to kind of give you the idea of where we're going. The first thing, let's take the gin. Now, we all know we've just come through a gin craze, a gin boom. There are 1,001, under exaggeration, there are 10,001 different gins out there. Gins, yes, they've all got juniper in them. They can't legally be called a gin if they haven't got juniper in them. So they've all got that juniper note. However, some gins will be bursting in juniper. Other gins, you won't even know it's there. So the base gin is going to make a huge difference. Just take these two, for instance. Citadel, I've got here, and Bombay Sapphire. 2 completely and utterly different tasting gins. And in a cocktail like this, it's gonna make a huge difference where they are just 3 ingredients. So that base gin, no matter whether you're going for a London dry, whether you're going for a flavoured gin, which we'll come on to in a bit, don't worry, but that whole base gin will make a huge difference. Now, chatting to this guy that asked that question, he came forward and said, I actually used Tanqueray in mine. Now, Tanqueray is a banging gin. It's got that really kind of bursting, it wasn't Tanqueray 10, it was the normal Tanqueray, the export strength, but it has got that bursting dry with juniper with a bit of citrus in there. Not too dissimilar to Citadel in that sort of sense, but a bit slightly different to something like Bombay. So again, some bars would pour Tanqueray, some bars would pour Sipsmith, some bars would go cheaper. It's just, there is no right or wrong, but the gin will make a difference. Now we come on to the Campari. Now, I would possibly argue, and I'm going to be hypocritical here, I would possibly argue that the Campari is the one non-negotiable in your Negroni. It kind of goes hand in hand. It is what, that's why most bars would have a bottle of Campari, is purely for the Negroni and drinks like that. So it is pretty much non-negotiable. However, first bit of inspiration coming up here, there are other things that you could use to come out to play. The first one, not kind of the same, but it's an obvious choice for you, Apero. They are bitter aperitifs. It is less bitter, it is more fruit forward. And I don't mean that in a sweet way, it's just got, it's lower ABV. I think it's 11% versus 25% ABV. So instantly, that 14% ABV is instantly gonna make a huge difference to the flavor of that. Not many bars I know would use Aperol, but that is an option for you. It's gonna give you a similar style of drink, but just a very different taste. So you've got that. But there is another player on the market, which I've got at home. My friend's Master of Malt sent me this, Mondino. Mondino I really like. It's kind of in between Aperol and Campari, 18% ABV, slightly more sort of orangey notes in there for me. And again, actually, when I'm using this in sort of tiki cocktails, because I love that bittersweet going on. I love the bitterness that sort of something like this would add to a cocktail now, but with the sweetness, actually 9 times out of 10, I do kind of go for the Mondino now, because it is less harsher, less feistier in bitterness than the Campari. Now there are a multitude of other kind of different bitter aperitifs on the market, but the other one, I haven't rocked this out for ages, but here's a big favourite of mine, Pampel. Imagine that, just grapefruit forward. It is a grapefruit forward bitter aperitif. ABV on this 15% ABV, so still not punching up at Campari levels, but will give you a very lovely, a very sexy grapefruit twist to that cocktail, which works superbly well. Really, and I actually would drink that. I would drink a Negroni with Pampel into a gin and vermouth, but Pampel instead of Campari, I would actually drink that because it is really delicious. The grapefruit forwardness of this, still being a bitter aperitif, is to die for. It's lovely. So the Campari is done. That's the kind of easy one. But this is where the conversation kind of went with this guy that asked the question, because I think the big player, the big huge difference, all right, gin will be a big difference, but the big factor in this is actually the vermouth. Now, I'm not a vermouth expert. It's not a kind of spirit category that I kind of got into. It's not something that I really spend time looking at or kind of paying attention to, but I have got the bare basics. And this is kind of what I was chatting to this guy about. This guy, he just openly and honestly said, I use a Morrison's Own vermouth. Now, that kind of led me into a few questions because I didn't know. The one thing we have to understand with vermouth, very basic, a very entry level, it is an aromatized wine. So you have different vermouths from different countries, and they're essentially going to be different wines. For instance, and this is just generalizing, this is not the law, this is not the be all and end all, but can you imagine Italian vermouths like Martini, like Cinzano, those kind of styles, they're typically kind of, you have to think of that base wine. It's like comparing a Pinot Grigio from Italy to comparing a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, or a Sauvignon Blanc, or something completely different, like a Chardonnay, for instance, or a Syrah, or something like that from France. Those kind of, I was talking about Pinot Grigio, I was talking about white vermouth there, but red vermouth. So I'm trying to think of a red Italian wine off the top of my head on the card. But kind of think a red Italian wine is going to be very different to a French Italian wine like that. And it's just like, so your base wine that's then aromatized up with completely different herbs and spices, that is going to be the big factor in your Negroni. Now, to continue this on, I do actually have 2 other vermouths here, red vermouths, which I actually quite like, to be honest. So we have got an Italian brand there. We've got an Italian Martini, probably the biggest global player in the whole vermouth kind of category. Mass market is huge. I've got a French vermouth here, Azaline. And the difference with this, yes, it's a red vermouth. Yes, it's a Rosso vermouth. The difference for this, it's got huge notes of saffron coming through in it. So again, that, compared to that, I like comparing a white rum with an aged tequila. They are literally so different in taste. You wouldn't even think they're the same category. All right, and then we move on to possibly my favourite vermouth brand, Lustau. Lustau are Spanish, but a big difference here, they're known for their sherry. This is actually a sherry-based vermouth. And the reason, you can kind of get it in your heads now, the reason I kind of like Lustau is because sherry is obviously a little bit sweeter, does still add that sort of feisty, sort of red wine, sort of aromatized red wine notes to it, but it's essentially a sweeter sherry-based vermouth. So all 3 of those products, even if you kept those 2, the gin and your Campari the same, all 3 of those are going to make completely and utterly different Negronis. So my whole point to this gentleman was that perhaps it wasn't that, you know, he makes better Negronis at home. He might have done, we don't know. But it's more to do with actually what a bar chooses to use. Now, when you take bars in general, and pubs to a certain extent, but bars in general, bars try and give you the premium feel. They want to give you that experience. So they're going to try and seek out better, more premium products. Now, there's 2 things to note here. Obviously, if you are using an Italian-based vermouth at home and you love an Italian-based vermouth and the bar is then using a French or a Spanish style of vermouth, just those 3 countries alone, then, you know, if you inherently don't like those base wines from that country, the chances are you're not going to be a big fan of that sort of style of vermouth. Take me traditional, take the Azaline out of the equation. Traditionally, I really, really detest French vermouth. I don't like French vermouth, but then I don't like French wine either. I don't mind Spanish, I don't mind Italian, but French wine, I'm not a huge fan of. So that's the first point. The first point being, you know, bars try and give you premium, trying to give you what they would deem as better. But coming that back, if your palate, if you really like the cheaper supermarket own brand stuff, that's absolutely fine. But just don't expect it to taste the same as a bar when you go out. You know, you might like your local, let's just talk about real ale. You might really, really love your local real ale or your local beer in your pub, and you go further afield and you go and try, you say you live in Cambridge where we do, and then you go to Manchester and you try a real ale, a local Manchester real ale, it's going to be completely different. You like what you like. It's not that the fact one is better than the other, it's just the simple thing, you like what you like. So that's kind of debunking the vermouth part of the Negroni. Now, before I go into the fun variations of this, and you can make this fun, you really can make this fun and add an extra dimension to your cocktail menus, to your parties at home, you really can. But before we go into that, I just want to go very quickly into the big famous riffs on this. So first off, by simply changing the base ingredient, so we take gin out of the equation and we use probably a better bourbon, but if we use a bourbon, we've got those 3 ingredients exactly the same. We've got a Boulevardier. So if you're a bourbon fan and you like your bitter kind of drinks, whack that in, Boulevardier. I've got Jim Beam here. But your favourite bourbon, favourite rye, anything like that is a Boulevardier. The second big famous riff, and you have to excuse me here because again, I forgot, it's put to side with the oranges. I had some Jamaican rum to bring in from home, but we can of course go, you know, other rum. But if you've got a Jamaican rum, the big famous twist on this is a Kingston Negroni. Okay, Jamaican rum in those 3. Other rum will work, but Jamaican kind of gives you that nice sort of funk vibes going on there. But obviously, if it's not Jamaican, you ain't going to call it Kingston, are you? So the Kingston Negroni is a big player in this. And then if we get rid of our base spirit altogether and put that to one side and just focus on these 2, your Campari and your Vermouth, if we add those 2 in equal measures into a highball glass and top out with soda water, we've got an Americano. And then to flip that out, if we take those 2 This time flip the soda water for Prosecco, which I've kind of got here. I've got my Prosecco, I've got my soda water, but if we flip that out into a highball, that, and Prosecco, we've got a Sabagliato. So we've got the Americano with soda water, Sabagliato with Prosecco. So then fun riff time. Let's put some smiles on faces. This would probably appeal to the wider audience of this of my videos, you know, the fun, fruity, not necessarily sweet, but the fun, fruity stuff. So just sticking with the base, your gin, your Campari and your martini. Again, I've just got the one here, but you know, I've covered this in so many videos. This actually, to be fair, go and check out the Apero video because the Apero spritz won't be too dissimilar to this. But just to bring Monin out to play, 15 ml. So equal measures of that, 15 ml of your Monin Blood Orange. You've got a Blood Orange Negroni, which I absolutely really do like. A Watermelon Negroni, and again, we've got ODK Watermelon in there, but Watermelon would be my big two favourites. 15, 10 ml, maybe even 5 ml, just that little extra touch. But anyway, I certainly wouldn't go 25 ml, but something like 5 to 10 to 15 ml of that in that, especially if you're doing 30 ml of base that, so you've got 90 ml of liquid, which is what that was, then 15 ml of that will be absolutely perfect. So Blood Orange Negronis, Watermelon Negronis, insert other cherry, strawberry, insert other flavoured syrup brands here and flavours, and you can go for your life on Negronis. Again, something, a little quirky little variations, quirky little riffs to put on cocktail menus. And then the final kind of variations to kind of talk you about without going too much over old ground is obviously your flavoured gin. Gin in the UK is still huge, not as big as rum, maybe not, but rum is coming. But anyway, gin is, the flavoured gin market is still pretty huge. Whitley Neal are obviously dominant in this. A couple of my favourites, Fauna Negroni actually. The watermelon and kiwi gin I think works an absolute treat with those two. So you've got equal measures, watermelon and kiwi, Campari and Martini Rosso or Vermouth of choice. But then the rhubarb. Rhubarb works exceptionally well in that as well. And then just one final flavour to give you, which I absolutely adore, and I think this works exceptionally well. This quite possibly would be my go-to, and this is from Master of Malt. It's one of their own brands, Atom Brands, Jaffa Cake Gin. So you've got obviously got the orange notes from the gin, which leads us on to Blood Orange Gin as well and all that sort of stuff. But we've got the orange notes from the gin, but then the chocolate vibes coming through there, typical Jaffa Cake style, chocolate and orange with your Campari, with your Vermouth of choice. It's absolute belter. And I do prefer, because I love my fun rum cocktails, I do prefer that style of Negroni as opposed to a classic style of Negroni. But let me know, what would be your choices?